Is your business still disrupting the industry, or are you already being disrupted? That's the big question. And in today's episode, we'll talk about just that. So let's jump right in. Hey, welcome to What's the Buzz, where leaders and hands-on experts share how they have turned hype into outcome. Today, we'll talk about how agents are disrupting business, and who better to talk about it than someone who's actively working on innovation management and disruptive innovation, Christian Muehlroth. Christian, thank you so much for joining.
Well, thanks. It's a pleasure. After seeing you in person a couple of weeks ago, now also being on this digital format. Thanks for having me. It's great.
Wonderful, awesome. It's been a while since since we've crossed paths digitally. I think it's almost 2 years ago that you invited me to your show. So it was great seeing you in person a couple of weeks ago, and now having you here. But not everybody might know you already, and if you don't know Christian yet, you should definitely give him a follow on LinkedIn. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do?
Yeah, sure. I keep it short. I'm Chris. I'm the CEO of ITONICS. We are a software as a services provider. We build software, basically. And what we build is a platform for enterprise innovation and technology management, which means we help companies actually make use of new technologies and create inventions and innovations and bring them to market to accelerate growth, to be more resilient in the time of disruption. And that we do with a software-first approach. And that's why we also talk about agents today, I guess.
Fantastic, exactly, right? I mean, there's so much talk about innovation in general, but very few are doing it well. So I'm sure you're getting a front row seat at what's working and what's not working. So I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Folks, if you're just joining the stream, drop a comment in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm always curious to see how global our audience is. And if you'd like to learn how you can turn technology hype into business outcomes, consider picking up a copy of the AI Leadership Handbook, your guide to doing just that. So, Chris, in good old fashion, why don't we play a little game to kick things off? Let's see.
Sure.
Fantastic. So, when I hit the buzzer, the wheels will start spinning. And when they stop, you'll see a question. I would love for you to answer with the first thing that comes to mind and why in your own words.
Okay.
Are you ready for What's the Buzz?
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. So, if AI were a color, what would it be? 60 seconds on the clock to make it a little interesting. Here you go.
Okay, a color. I say if AI were a color, it would probably be white. And the reason is because white contains all colors. So I think that resonates well with AI, which is more, in my opinion, a general purpose technology that probably can take on kind of any task in the digital, but also maybe soon in the physical realm. But also it needs something to channel through, like a prism. Yeah? It needs a prism to be useful. Data, ontology, policies, agency, tasks, intention, ideas, whatever. Yeah. So unfocused, it's white. Yeah, it's a glare. Yeah. But then focused through, laser focus, it becomes a color, and then also useful in practice.
I love it. What an awesome answer. And what a great segue to talk about innovation too, right? You really need to channel it through something, almost like a catalyst. Otherwise, it's just there, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything meaningful for you. Beautiful. I mean, just like that, right? Innovation also isn't something that just magically happens, and it also doesn't happen momentarily. How does innovation typically occur, and what comes together now in this wave of AI agents?
Yeah, it's so interesting because if you think of the major innovations, first of all, probably it's great to distinguish between invention and innovation. I know it's been done in literature and everywhere else, but I just think it's interesting and important to do it, specifically in the age of AI, because AI was not invented in the recent months or years. the foundation, specifically the physics, but also the machine learning algorithms and the mathematics and the statistics and the algorithms, they're based, in decades ago, in groundwork that was being done decades ago. But so that was the invention. But the innovation now came in the recent years, which made things much more useful. That's because of the processing power for sure, but that's also because of the electricity needs of the data centers, the scale, the user interface, and so on. So these innovations, sure, also in algorithmic, but also in delivery of the AI, actually made it much more useful in the recent years. And that's still a little bit sometimes confused in practice, the difference between invention and innovation. And I think right now, specifically with AI, we kind of see it very clearly what's an invention and what is actual an innovation that's useful to the market.
Yeah. So when we met a couple of weeks ago, it was part of a panel discussion, and you mentioned some parts of innovation management and in innovation theory. We started talking about these waves, these innovation waves or contradictive waves, based on the Soviet economist. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. By the way, it's also in the book, because when I took innovation management at university, I was quite excited to learn about it. But maybe you can share a little bit about what's up with contradictive waves and how they now fit into this innovation cycle.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting, and I love that you have it in your book. I'll totally recommend the book. By the way, it's really great, and the pure fact that you already have contradictive waves in there, I know makes it a great book. Yeah? And I think it's interesting because the theory is that everything, really everything in life, not only technology but everything, goes in waves. Yeah, things go up, things go down, then they go sideways for some time, but ultimately they go in waves. And that's, if you look back in history and the history of technology and then also society, that actually has been the case. You always know in retrospect what these waves are. For example, the steam economy, electricity, then the internet. These are all considered, big waves, big technological waves of change, typically. And then after technology, typically, big societal and also work transformation and business transformation follows. But of course, it takes some time. And by the way, many of these actually stem from military and defense applications like the internet. So it's pretty interesting to also see, what those folks are up to. But that's kind of the theory. And the interesting thing about it is that I think time is getting compressed right now. So the length of each wave, maybe, back in the 1800s something, it was recognized to be 60 years, 70 years maybe. But these waves are getting shorter and shorter. And the reason is pretty obvious, is because if you can stack the technologies on top of each other. So the previous wave or the previous waves even support the next one. We need electricity for the internet. We need the internet now for scaling AI and so on. So they build upon each other, and that's why we feel that everything is accelerating these days.
To me, that is fascinating, right? Especially the layering of things, and if you've been in the industry for a while, you have seen this, right? Whether it was your dial-up modem and cable, now on your phone and whatnot, and all the services that enables now, to your point, add data, add AI on top, and whatever is next. So it also feels like things are moving indeed faster, right? We've been talking about this for a long time, and you observe this probably in your own lives too. But it's sometimes getting to the point where it's not only overwhelming, but where you feel disrupted, and maybe where your business feels disrupted. And what are you seeing when you work with companies who are looking at innovation management and who are, for example, looking at software to manage that process? Why do companies fear this kind of disruption? And what do you think now with agents this disruption really drives?
Yeah, it's very interesting because you have, if you consider this on two axes, right? So you have the accelerating technological change. That's very true, and as you say, I 100% agree. Everybody feels it. Everybody can observe it right now. But there is also a second aspect to it, which is that specifically large enterprises and big corporations, they know very well that the larger they get, the slower they actually get. And that's a problem, because then you have basically a gap between the accelerating technological change. Things get faster and faster and faster over the years. We've specifically seen it with the foundation models, over and over again, improving at a impressive rate. But then at the same time, we see organizations always running behind, because they have processes, they have politics, they have, people, some policy stuff, and which basically leads them to be slower in the adoption rate. So the bigger they get, the more processes, the more politics, the more policies they have, which means ultimately that they actually slow down. So you have an exponential acceleration in tech, but you have actually an algorithmic rate of change of those large organizations. They are getting slower and slower. So that means that the risk of disruption is pretty real, because it's even for those organizations, it's even a super exponential. It's more than an exponential rate of change, because they get slower. And that's where the risk is.
So we've seen these examples time and again, right? Kodak, who dismissed digital cameras, and we believe people still want to take pictures in analog and film and things. We've seen Blockbuster, who didn't see Netflix coming. We had Nokia, who didn't see the iPhone coming. All of these, are those the kind of examples that we should be looking for in our own organizations, or are there other examples where maybe it's not quite that obvious? And by the way, it's only obvious in hindsight, right? What they've
Yeah.
missed.
And that's the main point. It's always, unfortunately, it's always obvious in hindsight. But on the other hand, sometimes I'm kind of surprised that we as with me, I mean the collective of organizations that are on the market, we don't learn too much from history, because there is tools and methodologies and ways. For example, there is corporate foresight. And I'm not saying that organizations should engage in year-long scenario creation techniques, because that's probably an outdated way, except for your public agency. But specifically private companies who cannot look forward right now 3, 5, 7 years. It's rare to be able to do that. But there is systems, algorithms, and ways how to understand signals of of change, how you capture them, how you interpret them, how you bring them in the organization, and how you also use them for decision making. And I'm always kind of surprised, because in specifically turbulent economic times, which we in 2025 might have right now, depending on the region where we're in right now, but then specifically companies de-invest in those capabilities and they go back and focus on the core business. Well, they actually should be the exact opposite thing. I know it's hard in these times, but specifically in those times, you should watch out, for the next thing, for the next move, and have a very rigid strategic intelligence. But that's not what they do. Mm-hmm. So they kind of, de-invest in stages where uncertainty is the highest, where actually in those stages, they should invest a lot in exploring potential future pathways.
So how does that then play out with agentic AI? And I feel we're still early. By the way, I saw Gartner's generative AI hype cycle and generative AI moving into the trough of disillusionment. Great. That means relief is near. People are figuring out what this can really do beyond shiny objects and throwaway proofs of concept. But with agentic AI, do you think this is really going to be that big of a disruption as some of the industry players and marketing departments are hyping it up to be?
Yeah, I think there is two things. One is the agentic AI is going to move us closer to an abundance economy because of the collapsing cost that's behind it. So right now, agents are kind of like interns that never sleep. They can be super smart, like PhD level in certain domains, but in general, they consider them as interns because they need oversight. But because the labor cost, trends towards zero or whatever you pay to these AIs, specifically for some rigid tasks or some mundane tasks. You don't have a headcount constraint anymore. You actually have a throughput constraint. And sometimes maybe even a lack of ideas. Okay, what should we do next? this is very practical. For example, in you can do much faster market scans, preparations, even coding, of course. I mean, these models are so great at producing software code. Yes, they might not know all your code base yet, but it's brilliant. Yeah, so that's in the digital space, and also in the physical space. When we have less boundaries on land, you can create, I don't know, maybe even cheaper physical production, higher buildings, faster production of facilities or whatsoever, if you now do this with robots or machines, whatever this is. So that's the first thing. It moves us through to abundance, specifically for labor. And that is in combination with something that we call amplified intelligence. So AI is amplified intelligence because humans still set the intent. We still have the agency, but the AI agents, they expand your capacity, sometimes even your capability to execute stuff. Speed, precision, and maybe even latency. So two things are interesting because they amplify human intention, and if you're really good at something, you can use AI to really 10x, 100x what you're doing. And at the same time, it gives us, specifically for mundane tasks, basically abundance in labor. And that's really disruptive.
So, question there. I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and that's a lot of the conversation right now. Also, if you look at media and what CEOs are publicly saying, especially those that are leading or want to be perceived as leading, a lot of this conversation is about, well, we're reducing the number of people. We're not hiring people because we want to look at AI. So is this the right and the only way to look at this, or why is nobody saying about we're giving you agents so you can 10x or 100x what you're doing? What's your perspective there?
I think you're spot on. You're really spot on, because the truth is probably both. Yeah, the truth on one hand is if you consider AI and agents as a way to automate specific labor, specific tasks, then yes, there will be people being laid off. I mean, we already see it specifically for the tasks where text-based AI, we currently just think about LLMs. There are different ways of artificial intelligence, but right now we focus a lot of text-based AI, so large language models and the like. And there is just so much you can automate with this sort of intelligence. So it's the truth. But at the same time, everything that requires human agency and also human creativity, human ingenuity, these things will remain. And probably the people who already are pretty creative, have a great level of ingenuity, agency, they now have tremendous opportunity to make a career, to make a business, and to bring this to life. So it's both sides.
So then where do organizations fall short? We know they should embrace this, or short or long, they will eventually look at this, even if it takes a couple of years, like we've seen with cloud or with mobile and other trends. But where are they failing in adopting this AI right now? And what's your recommendation? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so we're seeing, first of all, that there is no redesign of legacy processes. So that means you just take inefficient processes and you put AI on top of it. But if you automate a shitty process, you get an automated shitty process, basically. Yeah. So that's kind of not. So you need to design your processes to work in this new area, and if they really don't make sense, then you shouldn't be automating it. For example, in Germany, we are digitizing our public processes to a large extent. At least we're trying since a couple of years. So what we do is basically, we had all these forms that you have to hand in to, some public agency to get some stuff, and you have to write, physically write on those forms. What we did is, when we digitized this process, we just put the forms on the screen. But we never think about, well, does it actually make sense to have a form? For example, if you have a newborn child, yeah, so you still have to hand in a specific document to request, some things from the government. But the government already knows anyways that you have a child, because there are other processes, registering your child. So why should I actually have to fill the form? Why couldn't the government just do this automatically, as they know I have now a new child? So we just took the same process, digitized it, and made that form on the screen. And if organizations do the same now with AI, have legacy processes and just try to automate them, it's probably not a good idea. So it's very expensive,
Yeah.
if you do this. That's one of the things. So just reconsider what makes actually sense, and it's a great opportunity right now to do it.
But
And the leading organizations do it. Yeah.
but it costs money and it takes time and we don't
Yeah.
know if it works. And I still want a paycheck and a bonus and a raise. So
Yeah.
yes, innovation, but please not too much and not too much at the same time. Is that something you
Yeah.
encounter or you perceive?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the truth, 100%, because it's comfortable. Yeah. I mean, specifically being in an organization, maybe you're in there for 10, 15, 20 years, and you kind of have a comfortable job. Well, why change? If there isn't pressure, unfortunately. And there can be positive and negative pressure for sure. So it goes both ways. But there is a certain tendency and an aversion to change. But there is also people who really want it. We see both in big corporates. We see people that say, go away with that stuff, or maybe I can sit it out or wait it out, or I don't know, just see what happens. We see this a lot, but to be honest, we also see the opposite. We see great people who have agency, who have ideas, who want to push forward, who also want to make a career. And for them, that's a perfect time to grab these opportunities and really deliver impact in those organizations.
So you have super progressive and excited and tech savvy folks on your team or in your organization. They want to try this out. They say, yes, I want change. We need to do this differently. And then you have the other side of the spectrum who say, well, please leave me alone. I just want to collect the paycheck and be here my 9 to 5 and then have a life outside of work. And by the way, I'm retiring soon, or yeah, to your point, I don't like change. How do you bring these two together, and is that maybe even the solution to making progress but still taking everybody along on this journey?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think to some extent, the decision makers who actually decide which way to go, they just need to be honest, with themselves and with the organization. I think it is a very noble goal to say, let's get as many people as we can on board. I think it's probably the right way to do,
Mhm.
but that's theory. And then there is practice. And you always have people who just do not want, for specific reasons. Maybe some can, some don't want. It doesn't really matter. But that's just normal. And I think while this is maybe a ground truth, specifically, senior executives and decision makers, they should then rather go with an 80% solution and say, we need to move on. This is the path. Everybody who wants gets on board, and the others, we need to see what we can do for them, and how we can help them basically get along. But um, as much inclusion as is needed, perfect, do it. But you also need to think in terms of the enterprise. And as we discussed in the beginning, we have this disruption risk, and it's imminent. It's really, really here. So maybe go with the 80% solution, and do whatever it takes.
See, I'm wondering if some of that is also more culturally relevant. I know Germany has a very democratic process in companies, and we should talk to many people and make sure everybody is heard and included and so on. And to your earlier point, I think that can a lot of times slow your business down as well.
Yeah.
I feel over here in the US, it might not be that long of a deliberation. We see the opportunity, we see the potential, we also see the pressure. What happens if we don't do this, if we don't adopt this? And I get the sense people are moving, businesses are moving relatively fast on many of these topics, certainly not all. But maybe culture plays into that too. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there is times where a more democratic approach might work a little bit better, and there are just times where a little bit more straightforward approach might work better. It's like a pendulum that swings.
Yeah.
It depends on the situation of the industry, of the company, of the enterprise, and for both have a reason to exist. But you just need to know when to deploy which approach and at which time. Yeah.
Good point. Yes. So definitely your leadership skills in figuring out when do I invite a dialogue? When is this a
Yeah.
decision that we move forward with, or to your point, an 80% solution that helps us move forward? So before we wrap up, I'm curious here. What do you recommend leaders do in addition to being sensible? What approach they should follow when it comes to leadership? But what should leaders do as they want to ride this wave of disruption? And instead of being disrupted, what's the one thing they need to do right now?
Yeah. So the one thing that is often overlooked, and that leads to AI tourism typically, is as boring as it may sound, yeah, laying the platform and the data foundation for it. Because most of the AI applications we've seen, they all are based on dirty data, which means wrong data sources. Just an example. We've seen many companies try and use and experiment with public large language models for any
Mhm.
sort of innovation or research and development tasks. But there's a couple of problems with it. For example, public LLMs currently lean a lot towards open web sources like Wikipedia and Reddit. There is some statistics that kind of try to prove it. But for, let's say, a concise R&D strategy or new product development strategy, you need clean enterprise data. That's customer insights, that's patterns, your own patterns to see where you have technological capability, but then also competitor information. You need to take your current R&D pipeline into account. You need to take your current product and services offerings into account, and so on. Otherwise, you lean too much into the public LLM data. So you actually need a very clean enterprise pool to make this usable, maybe even a shared taxonomy. That's, for example, what we enable in ITONICS. So we make sure, so we don't use public LLMs. We have a different approach. We didn't train our own, but we deploy one specifically in our infrastructure. So, data never leaves ITONICS. It doesn't go to OpenAI. It doesn't go to Anthropic. It doesn't go to Perplexity. It's all within the existing data privacy contract you already have with ITONICS in that case. So it's much more safe and secure, and we can prove that. So that's the thing. Lay the foundation specifically with the data. Otherwise, you have dirty data and you have just open web source data, which is not really useful in the specific R&D and innovation context.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Chris, we're getting close to the end of the show, and I was wondering if you can summarize the key 3 takeaways for our audience today.
Yeah, sure. Let's go to the beginning and let's. So the first one is the abundance AI, the abundance economy. So because AI means amplified intelligence, I would look specifically towards use cases and empowering people that want the change and amplify their human intelligence with AI, amplify their creativity, give them the most expensive tools. Don't I understand the approach of rolling out AI to everybody because you want to leverage or kind of leverage everybody and kind of raise the bar for everyone. But that's a lot of experimentation and leads to AI tourism because everybody tries out some things, actually wasted potential and wasted time and money. So my first suggestion and recommendation would be think of AI as amplified intelligence and provide the tools to the people who really want the change and give them the best tools, the most expensive ones, because that's 10xing, 100xing sometimes their capabilities. And I think this is one key takeaway. The second thing is take disruption seriously because we've seen it a lot. You've mentioned so many examples. Yeah, we're kind of tired of the Kodak and Nokia examples because they've been decades ago, but I'm pretty sure we will see many of those examples in the future. So, don't undervalue and don't overstate the too big to fail. Disruption is really imminent right now.
And make sure that your company doesn't become the next Kodak or
Yep.
Blockbuster that will tell for generations.
Yeah, you don't want to be on that list, really.
Yes.
You just don't want. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is get the foundations and the data right. It takes some time, but it's not a hard thing to do, but it's an important thing to do. And if you are doing it, and if you have really clean data, specifically on everything R&D and innovation, and over time you stack more and more technology use cases on top of it and add AI and agents to it, this is maybe one of the most competitive advantages you can get to make most out of your data in the next years to come.
Wonderful. Chris, thank you so much for joining and for sharing your expertise with us.
Well, it's always a pleasure talking to you, and thanks much for the invitation.
Wonderful. Folks in the audience, see you next time for another episode of What's the Buzz. Bye-bye.
Bye.